But today, we'll start with the Turing machine, and that is in chapter 3.1. So chapter 3.1 on the Turing machine. So although it looks abstract, you're not allowed to be confused by a Turing machine because it's very simple. If you ever feel confused, you just need to slow down and understand what it's saying. So I want to motivate this to you by means of an example. First, just recall from the timeline that this was Turing in 1936. Always good to keep track of where in history we are. And it's a rigorous mathematical definition, so we have to deal with that. But it's for the intuitive concept of just pseudocode or code running on a computer. So let's use the following example to help us understand what a Turing machine is doing. Are you familiar with Python? Yes? Okay, great. So I'll use Python. Of course, it doesn't matter the language. So let's create an initial list of values being 0 and 1. And then I'm going to have a loop for I in the range some number n minus 2. Every iteration of this loop, I want to append a new value to my list of values. And the value that I want to append is going to be the second previous number. In Python, you can use negative indices to go backwards, plus the last number that we have, vals negative 2 plus vals negative 1. Append that to the list. So who could tell me, if anyone, what this program is calculating? Famous sequence of numbers in math, computer science. Fibonacci, exactly right. Yeah. So these would be the Fibonacci numbers. So starting with 0 and 1, and then you add the previous two, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. So let's pretend we didn't know that, though, and let's pretend we're just a computer. What is the computer going to do? It's going to have some memory. So let's create a box for memory. And then it's going to have a processor. So let's create another box for the processor. And I'll put the program itself in another box and call this intuitively the program. Okay? So the first thing that I need to do if I'm the computer is I need to know where to start. And I'm going to represent that for now as an arrow to the left of the program indicating where we are and what we're doing. So have you heard the term program counter before? A program counter is essentially this. It's going to indicate on which line of the program you're at and what you're doing. So for now, I'm going to call this arrow. That's going to update. We start with it here, the program counter. Okay. So the first thing that this program tells us to do is to go into memory. There might be stuff here. It might be empty. It doesn't matter for us. But it's telling us to create a list called values, or vals for short. And start that out with two numbers, 0 and 1. Okay? So we're playing the role of the program counter. And so we've executed this line. Now the program counter is going to advance to the next line, the for loop. It might create the range object, but I'll just say it's creating the integer variable I, which is going to start out, if you know Python, with the value of 0. And go up, let's say n is large enough so that we execute a few lines of this program. So I is going to start out as 0. And we've done that line. Now we're going to go in the next line, which I've written as 3, but let's treat it as one line. So I'm going to append something to this list of values that I started with 0 and 1. I need to do some processing in order to do this. I need to add two of the numbers. So what the processor is going to do is it's going to look at the list. It's going to get the second to last number, that's 0. So this number is going to be going to come over into the processor. And then the same thing is going to happen with the last number. So 0 comes over into the processor, 1 comes over. And then we give it the instruction to add the two numbers together. Okay? So the processor, the arithmetic logic unit, whatever, evaluates this, and it gets the result 1. And then the line tells us to append that back into the list. So this 1 now goes back into the list, and I append it as the newest value to values. Okay? So then this process is going to repeat, right? So I is going to change from 0 to 1. Same thing is going to happen. I'm going to look at the last two numbers in the list. They're now 1 and 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 gets appended to the list. And you can keep doing this. We'll just do one more. 1 changes to 2. 1 and 2 are the previous last two numbers in the list. 1 plus 2 is 3. And that gets appended to the list of values. Let's say we stop there. So this program would then stop, or we could say that it halts. So this is what a Turing machine is going to do. We're just going to use slightly different language, and it's going to be slightly more abstract. But this is the intuition that I want you to have. The program itself, in the language of a Turing machine, is still going to be called a program. So that one we luck out on. The program counter, we're going to call a tape head. Tape head. And sometimes you'll see this as a read/write tape head. It's going to be something, looking at a tape, which we'll define in a second, which has the ability to read a symbol on that tape and then write another symbol. But it's just playing the role of the program counter. It's where we are in the program and what we're doing. So we have the program, same word, and now we have the program counter changed to a tape head. The reason it's called a tape head is because the memory we're going to call the tape. Memory is going to be called tape. It's going to be a one-dimensional list, that might resemble, a tape. And the last thing that we'll have is going to be the processor becoming what we call the finite state control. Finite state control. Okay? So these are the terms that you see in the Turing model, but now you know what they map onto. And let's define the Turing machine using this language and say a little bit more about what each component does. So, a Turing machine is a model of computation with the following four components. The program, the finite state control, the tape, and lastly, the tape head. Okay. So let's break these down a little bit, and this is where it gets to be a little more abstract, but eventually you'll see it's simple once we do an example. So let's look at first the finite state control. Finite state control. You have to think we're being very abstract now. We're trying to define a model of computing which captures everything that a computer can do. So this is going to consist of a finite set of internal states. And we're going to index these Q1 up to Qm, however many you have in your particular Turing machine. And then there's going to be two additional special states, Q sub s and Q sub h. Q sub s is going to be the starting states, which from the term you can guess that's what our Turing machine is going to start in. And then QH will be the halting states. When we hit that state, the Turing machine will stop or will halt. So the finite state control, again, playing the role of the processor. And when you think about it, it's pretty intuitive. A processor can only do a certain number of things. It could do addition, subtraction, so on and so forth. We're just being very general, and we're saying let's just call these things the states, the operations that the processor can do, Q1 through Qm, and there's two special states, the starting state and the halting state. The tape, which is playing the role of the memory, is arguably even simpler. We're going to index this, represent this, as a one-dimensional list. The leftmost square is going to have a special symbol, which is this triangle or right-facing arrow. And this is just going to be a one-dimensional list that could go on as long as you'd like, where each one of these can hold one symbol. And we call those tape squares. So the tape itself is a one-dimensional memory, or list, if you will, consisting of tape squares, which are indexed naturally, as you might expect, 0, 1, 2, so on and so forth. So this leftmost one would have the index 0, index 1, index 2, and then that continues. And each tape square can hold a symbol from an alphabet. And as in the textbook, I'm going to call that alphabet capital Gamma, capital Greek letter gamma. And it could be anything you'd like. Let's just use this one for an example, one that we're comfortable with, see often. Either a 0 or a 1, so binary alphabet, or a blank symbol. So that's going to be representing nothing in the tape. So these are all blank right now. And the symbol I'll use to represent that, since you have to put something there, is a B for blank. So this would be a valid tape. We could also put binary numbers in some of these, 0, 1, 1, 0, and then this one could be blank. So each tape square holds a symbol from our alphabet, which is, for example, 0 or 1, the binary alphabet. Now we'll have the third component. This will be the read-write tape head. And as with the program counter in this example, sort of an arrow indicating where we're at, that's going to be the exact same way that we represent it. So the tape head is going to be an arrow pointing to the current tape square. And this tape head, as we mentioned, can read the symbol and can write a new symbol. So it can read, write symbols in memory on the tape. The last thing that we have finally is the program itself. So the program is going to consist of program lines which have the following form. So the program will consist of program lines of the form, going to use angled brackets, going to have the current state, which will just be some q, and the current symbol, which will be some x. So the first two lines will have the current state. Remember, the state is referring back to the state control. It's one of the states that we could be in, Q1 through Qm, with the two special states. And then we'll have x being the current symbol. So what the program line is going to do is say, if you're in this current state, and if the tape head is looking at this current symbol, then do something. It's going to do the following. It's going to change q to q prime, so this will be the new state. and it's going to change x to x prime. This will be the new symbol. Okay? So, and we'll do an example, but for now, if your tape head is looking at this current symbol and the Turing machine is in this current state, update to this potentially new state, it could be the same state, and write this new symbol, potentially, it could be the same symbol, into that square. And then the last thing is we're going to tell the tape head where to go. So we'll represent that with letter S, and this is where to move the tape head. All right, so this is your definition of a Turing machine. For now, it's a little abstract, but we're going to do an example. I'm going to write the example here. I think we'll have enough room. And first, I'm going to write out the program itself, because there's 7 lines to it. It'll take a second. While I'm writing out the program, please ask any questions if you have them about the definition of a Turing machine so far.